All right. Well, I think we'll go ahead and get started. So welcome everyone. My name is Dr. Rossana Musetti. Let me see if I can get situated here. I'm your superintendent of schools here in the Napa Valley Unified School District. And it's my absolute pleasure and honor tonight to be hosting NVUSD's first Community Authors Night of our virtual series here in our very unusual 2021 school year. That has forced us to consider different ways to develop community-based learning experiences here for our NVUSD families and students. And it's my absolute pleasure to welcome on our first night this evening in October, Ms. Aida Salazar, the author of both The Moon Within and Land of Cranes. So I want to just provide you with a warm NVUSD welcome, Aida. Thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you so much for having me. I had to unmute myself. Thank you to the community, the Napa Valley Unified School District community, for having me for this incredible honor. I didn't know that I was the first, but I'm so happy to kick it off.
You are the first. So before we dive in, I want to just recognize the hard work that went into coordinating this event and kind of the reason behind our effort. Assistant Superintendent Pat Andrew Jennings, who I know who's here tonight with us, her instructional services team, along with our district librarian, Kate McMillan, were critical forces in making sure that we could start our series tonight with you. And they've done some extraordinary work of ensuring access to your latest book, Land of Cranes, which I had the pleasure of reading this weekend, and I can't wait to talk about it with you tonight. And so that'll be going out to many of our NVUSD teachers, so we're really excited about that. Pat, you want to talk a little bit about what's been done for NVUSD teachers in terms of access to Land of Cranes before we get to talk to Ms. Salazar?
Yes, as part of our literacy initiative, we are so pleased to be able to provide a copy of this lovely book to all our 4th, 5th, and 6th grade English teachers. So they'll be able to either read it aloud and share it with their students and use some of the story to help students with their inspire their reading. So I'm really happy to have you here tonight, and I'm looking forward to hearing just all about you in terms of your becoming an author and the story of Land of Cranes. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Andrew Jennings, for the hard work of the instructional division. And then I just want to recognize, I know we have several of our NVUSD board members also tuning in tonight as participants. I hope I don't miss any of them, but I see Trustee Jankwitz, Trustee Gracia, Trustee Water, Trustee Hurtado. Thank you so much. I think I see Trustee President Martin. Thank you for joining us tonight. We greatly appreciate your engagement and support. Our NVUSD Board of Education is very much in support of us ensuring a culture of literacy in our organization, knowing that literacy is a powerful tool in terms of educational access for our students and just overall enriching their learning and their lives. And so I personally want to thank them for their support of this effort as well. So let's get started, because every minute with an author is, it's just a moment of gold. And so Aida, before we get started talking about Land of Cranes, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you became an author? We had many of the participants submit questions that they might have. And a very common question was, how did you become an author and how can you become an author? And I know we have a lot of students who might be in contact with your book who want to know your story.
Okay. Well, let's see. You know, I began writing when I was in 5th grade. I did very well in my 5th grade class. And at the end upon graduation, my teacher, Mr. Clark, gave me 2 things. He gave me a book, the first book that I would ever own of my own. And it is called Where the Sidewalk Ends by Shel Silverstein. And then he gave me a pen. And back then, this is the olden days, of course, but they were these Parker pens. They were like these weighted, heavy pens, and you could exchange the cartridges, and it just made you feel very special when you wrote. So I began to write. reading poetry by Shel Silverstein and writing with my pen. And I kept it in my journal my whole life, well, my whole young life until I got to college. And I read everything that I could read. I read Judy Blume and Encyclopedia Brown and the Choose Your Own Adventure books, and that everything that was available to me, I read. And so when I got to college, I entered a class called Latino Literature, the study of Latino literature, or something like that. And for the first time in my entire life, did I read stories that were similar to mine. I read the work of Elena Maria Viramontes, Sandra Cisneros, Rodolfo Anaya, and others. And it was like a moment of illumination. Like I was transformed, because for the first time I saw my reality, the way that I spoke, the way that my parents spoke in the pages of a book. And not only did I see myself for the first time reflected in a book, I also believe that all of the things that I've been writing in my notebooks, in my journals and diaries, were worthy of being in the pages of the book. And at that moment, I said, I'm going to become a writer. I want to become a writer. This is something that I love. And that's how I started my journey. It would take me about another maybe 7 years before actually I graduated from college, a 4-year university at UC Santa Barbara. And then I went to graduate school to get a degree in writing. And I graduated in 1999, so 21 years ago, with an MFA in writing. But life got in the way. I had children and I got married and I moved to Oakland, and it wasn't until I became a mother that I saw, I used to take my children to the library and we would check out dozens of books and we read lots and lots and lots of books. But again, very few books reflected the reality that my children experienced. And so I set out to change that. I asked the librarian one day, I said, hey, do you know if there are any Brown princess stories? And he said, nope, you got to write it. And I said, oh yeah, good idea. And so I started to write stories for my children so that they could see themselves reflected in literature. And a few years later, here I am publishing my book. The first one I published was this one, The Moon Within. And then that one came out in Spanish, and now we have Land of the Cranes. And I'm scheduled to release another 4 books in the coming 2 or 3 years. So that's
so exciting. I get to just kind of hear about how one becomes an author. Tell us just a little bit. So how old are your kids? And just a little bit more outside your life. So you have 2 kids, you said?
Yeah, I have 2 kids. I have one is 12 and one is 15. And I listen to them speak to their friends a lot. I like to eavesdrop because that's how one collects stories and voices that you then transcribe and kind of get inspired by to put inside the books. Yeah.
And did you ever envision yourself writing children's literature, or was
No,
no,
not at all. I didn't. I used to write for adults. I wrote lots of poetry, very kind of dark, intense adult themes and topics. But then when I saw that there was just a lack of Latino voices in children's literature, I said, well, why not mine? And why not from this particular perspective, from my perspective, my view of living in Oakland, in a multicultural, multi-ethnic community that was filled with art and music and dance. And so that's what inspired my first book, The Moon Within, which is about a girl in Oakland who's multiracial and multi-ethnic. and she is coming into puberty, and she's feeling all these feelings, and she's got a crush on her best friend, on a boy, and her best friend also has a crush on the boy, but for different reasons. And then when they try to win the boy's friendship, the boy is mean to her best friend for being genderqueer, and so she has to decide where her loyalties lie, and she decides to well, I won't give it away, but I'll say that she has to decide to do the right thing and how to be a good ally, a good friend for her friend.
Great. Well, thanks for giving some insights into your first book. So tonight we're here to talk about your second book, The Land of Cranes, that just published a couple of weeks ago. So we feel really privileged that we get to hear from you early on. I'm sure that you're doing lots of virtual book touring. Aida, before we launch into the conversation, would it be helpful to start maybe with a trailer about the book?
Please, yes. This trailer is it's kind of like a movie trailer. It just gives you a sense of what the book is about.
Okay, why don't we get started with that? So, Mr. Ruiz, can you please share the video?
When Betita's family migrated to East LA, her father told her they were like birds who've come home to Aslan, land of the cranes. Betita loves to fly on Papi's shoulders, to dance with Mommy and Papi, and write picture poems in her 4th grade class. But then one day, Papi is taken away by ICE and sent to Mexico. And soon, Mommy and Betita are trapped inside a cage with other migrants. When this unimaginable cruelty threatens to tear them down, will Betita find a way for her voice to inspire change?
Wonderful. Well, thanks for sharing that, Aida. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the inspiration of the story? I got to this weekend get to know the character of Betita, the main character in the book, and it was incredible to hear the story told through her voice and the voice of a young girl. But why don't you tell us a little bit about the inspiration and how you came to build the character of Betita?
Well, it's kind of a magical experience what happened with Betita. I was sitting and I was studying. One of the things I do is I study picture books to understand how they work. And I was studying a book about the loss of a grandfather. And all of a sudden, my pen wrote the word deportation. And within minutes, I was listening to this voice of a child just pour out of my pen. And it was as if I were her personal secretary, and I could not stop writing. And she was there telling me this, and this happened to me, and this is why, and it was really remarkable. And 30 pages later, when I came up for air, my face was just awash in tears, and she was there. I knew her fully. I knew her past and her present and all of the things she liked and disliked. And I committed to continue to write her story, and a week later, The Land of the Cranes was complete. And so it was a time during which the communities in the East Bay were terrified. Actually, all of California were being persecuted. The mayor of Oakland, Libby Schaaf, had said that there was going to be ICE raids happening in the community, and she warned the community, and so people were terrified. And also during that time, a farm worker couple, husband and wife, were on their way to work. They had just dropped off their daughter at school, and they were chased by ICE. And in the chase, they crashed their car and died, leaving behind 6 orphans. And so these were the stories that were kind of in my heart and very broken heart during the time that I wrote this story. So it made sense to me that Betita came to talk to me about it. And why me? Well, because I happen to be a formerly undocumented person. When I was born in Mexico, and I was brought over as a child. I was 9 months old when my parents came over, and they were coming in search of the American dream. And because of my sister, who was born 2 or 3 years later, we were able to apply for our residency. But I spent most of my childhood till I about 12 or 13 years old undocumented. And so I understand this fear, the fear that the community has, and every dreamer that is trying to get documentation, or every person who fears for their authorization to be in the country. I feel it, because that's an experience that I held. And it was a surprise to me, because a lot of the fear that was happening, that happened in March when I wrote the story, and the zero tolerance policy of the Trump administration did not begin to be enacted until the summer of 2018. And so it was a surprise that I had written this story and then saw it actually come to life. But I should say that the story of children being trapped inside of these detention centers started happening during the Obama administration, when many unaccompanied minors were coming to the United States, and that's how they were dealing with them. So all of that was the reason, and the kind of the atmosphere in which I wrote Land of the Cranes.
Yeah, it was pretty incredible. I know many of us who worked in schools at the time, many of these policies were being passed. I know here in the Napa Valley Unified School District and other school districts throughout California claimed being sort of sanctuary districts. Many boards passed those policies because we wanted to ensure that our students who may be impacted by these immigration issues feel like schools are safe havens, right? Like every child should feel safe at school, and really they should feel safe where they live, and where their community is. Why don't you talk a little bit? The story's got so many compelling and relevant themes. I mean, especially here in our NVUSD community, just the story of migration and immigration. And you do this extraordinary job of this analogy of the cranes. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the analogy of the cranes, how that helped frame the story for you to tell us Betita's story, and its connection to migration and immigration, because I know there's so many people in our community that have a strong connection to that narrative.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that happened kind of very organically. So one of the stories that Betita's father tells her is, like you saw in the trailer, is the myth of the Aztecs' homeland. And the myth says that the Aztecs lived in the southwest of the United States, and that they left Aslan. Aslan has been translated to Land of the Cranes. So they left Aslan to travel south to found their great city in the navel of the universe, which is Mexica Tenochtitlan, modern day Mexico City. And that one day, the prophecy or the myth said that they were to return to the Land of the Cranes. And so Betita's father tells her that they are like cranes. They should be free to fly as cranes, and that they've come back home to live among the cranes again. And so that's why the entire story, she believes that she's a crane. She believes that she has wings. She believes that she can fly. And she cannot understand how it is that birds get caged, and how wings get clipped. And so there are a lot of these metaphors around flight and freedom. And if we think about how the entire world was populated, it was through migration. And it is us who have drawn the lines in the sand. It is us who've created borders and have deemed people illegal when they cross these imaginary borders that we created. So, you know, the analogy or the metaphor really leans hard on the concept of how the animal world and the human world also migrates. And why do we migrate? If we think about it on the most basic level, it's because we are trying to create an environment that is going to make us survive or thrive. The animals leave when it's too cold. They go south where it's warmer, and or they're seeking food. Migration is an act of survival. And you know, a lot of the criticism about migrants is that, you know, why do they leave their homes and come and become a burden in somebody else's home? Because many of them have no choice, and they're doing it for survival.
Yes, and that's again such a story, right? It sounds like you as an immigrant from Mexico, so many of our students are immigrants from various places or their parents, and so it's really I think powerful to remind the community that it's the seeking for a better life, right? We're seeking something better for our families. We're in pursuit of something that we need as a family and community. So thank you for reminding us. You know, it was challenging. Betita's experience inside the detention center is it's not easy. You hear about a lot of the difficulties, we can call them inhumanities, that are experienced within the detention center, and your story illuminates that. Can you talk a little bit about how you conducted your research and how you were able to kind of put that segment of the story sort of together for us to get an insider perspective, particularly through a child's view, because we know that there are many children in detention centers who are in the process of potential deportation. Can you talk to us about how you learned about that?
Sure. Well, you know, as I said, I did grow up in undocumented. So many of the stories and the condition that I felt, and the fear that I felt, and the uncertainty that I experienced as a child is in the book, especially at the beginning of the book. And so I didn't have to go very far to write that was there. But inside the detention center, when I set out to kind of verify what I had been told by Betita, to verify it or to enrich and the details, there were very few articles. I really relied on journalism, and the articles had very few images of people in detention, especially children. But when so the book was written around March, but when June and July started happening and the entire world's eyes turned their attention to the situation at the border, there was volumes of journalistic reporting that happened as a result, and many of these journalists interviewed the children. And so I have, you know, dozens and dozens of articles that I comb through to try and find the voices of the children. And so I Betita's voice was there, her innocence, her hope, and her artistry, because she's a poet. She writes these picture poems. It was there, but so I just kind of had to be really faithful to Betita's voice to describe what was in those articles. So, like, one of the things that they did experience was frozen burritos that were sometimes moldy, or that they had to drink water from the toilet tank, or that they, had to go to the bathroom in the same cell where everybody was in. It was just divided by a cinder block or a sheet. Or that they slept all, together, or that they had lice, or that they coughed and coughed and coughed because it was so cold and they were sick, or that they had toothaches and no medical care. So all of these things were all details that came from the journalists, reporting.
Thank you.
Can I add just one more thing? I also, very out of respect for the children, I did not personally seek to interview children because of the trauma that they had experienced. I didn't want to open up a wound that they were beginning to process. So out of respect, and also, I mean, yeah, it was just difficult.
Yeah, well, that's a great segue to my next piece. Any great piece of literary work, but particularly children's books, there's always great lessons for kids to learn. And I know we have a lot of our NVUSD kiddos listening tonight and watching with their parents. We learn about the harsh realities of life, and we hear about what happens to immigrant children if detained at a detention center for immigration reasons. But we also got to see this incredible ray of light in Betita and the characters and some of the friends that she made at the center. These children who just demonstrate an extraordinary amount of courage, being separated from their parents and their families and having all this fear, but really through one day at a time, just really demonstrating courage and hope. And so do you want to talk a little bit about sort of that, the light in the dark, right? That children bring to life and to the story, and Betita brings to us as she tells her challenging, difficult story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. For you students out there, I want, when you read Betita's story, I hope that you can see her life and her experience inside a very difficult situation as a roadmap, because she did something inside of the detention center that we're going to give it away a little bit, but she writes picture poems, meaning she'll draw a picture and then she'll write a few verses as to what she's feeling. And those picture poems, she taught the rest of the detainees how to do them, and they collected them, and that was one of the ways that they were able to free some of them and change the conditions inside of the detention center. And that's just one way. She relied on her voice, on her art, to speak about something that, speak her feelings, really, just what she felt about something that she had no control over. And so I hope that you as readers can see that as an example and find inspiration to do the same thing. And so if you ever find yourself in a difficult situation, you think, what would Betita do? What would I do like Betita to inspire change, or to lift myself up off of sadness or whatever difficult experience you might be feeling? So that was the point of that. Mm-hmm.
She was really inspirational as she persisted through that challenge. And we won't give away the story for those who haven't read it, but is really inspirational. There's a quick phrase, and then I'm going to toss to some of our audience tonight to ask questions of the author, because I know there's probably parents and students who would love to speak to you directly. But her father says it in Spanish and in English, the concept of finding sweetness in the struggle, dulzura. And so can you talk to us a little bit around that? That was one of the pieces as this family is separated and dealing with all the challenges we know a lot of our migrant families face. They kept going to work, getting Betita to school. And her father, despite some of these challenges, put this little seed in her mind, which she carried with her, of this idea of there's sweetness in the struggle. Can you talk to us a little bit about the inspiration around that?
Yeah. So that was actually inspired by a woman named Betita Martinez, who inspired the name Betita in the book. And Betita Martinez is an activist. She's in her 90s now, and she's an activist in the Bay Area. And she says this. She says, "Find sweetness in your struggle." But I think for me, what it means is that do not give up hope. It means to not give up hope. That even though things are really, really difficult, and life, especially right now, is so hard, and you can easily kind of sink into how difficult it is. But so long as you seek it, if you find it, try and find whatever glimmer of hope and whatever sweetness that you can find, then you just cling to it, because that's the only thing we have. And many people, when I grew up, I was very poor, and one of the things we always did was laugh. My mother was always singing, and so even whistling or telling funny stories to one another, those are things that cost nothing, and can bring you a little bit of light in your difficult days.
For sure. We all need those simple joys, especially
Mm-hmm.
today. That's true for our kids and our parents, our educators,
Mm-hmm.
all finding a need for just simple joys. So sweetness in the struggle it is.
Yes.
Okay, well, I'm going to open the floor a little bit. So I see that we have some hand raised, but I'm going to ask our NVUSD community to not be shy. We're really privileged to have an author here with us tonight. And so I'm going to see if there's any hands out there. And then I also have some of the questions that were curated in advance of the event. But I thought I'd give an opportunity to any of our live participants tonight. They'd like to raise their hand and ask a question of Ms. Aida Salazar, author of The Land of Cranes and The Moon Within. So Mr. Ruiz, let's start with Cristian Pineda. If you can unmute him.
I was just gonna tell Aida if she's also the illustrator for her books.
Sadly, I'm not. This book, this book was illustrated by a partnership, Kwang and Lien, and they do beautiful picture books and other illustrations. And actually, inside the book, if once you get it, you can see some of their illustrations. Hold on, let me find one. And actually, you see that was some of the that they did a lot of illustrations inside, and that's how we did the trailer. Yeah, you see that? Beautiful work. I wish I was that talented, but I'm not. I just got really lucky with these people. And this one, for this book, this one was this man named Joe Cepeda, and he did, I'm sure you probably have seen this book in the library because it's been around for 20 years. It's called Esperanza Rising, and by Pam Munoz Ryan. He did the same one, and actually that's the painting of this, a different version of this cover. Very lucky to have that painting in my house.
That's great, Christian. Well, thank you for your question. We do have the author with us tonight, but we know great books also have great illustrators. So thank you so much. Next, we have Gabriela Quintero.
Dr. Massetti, Gabriela Quintero, she's running an older version of Zoom, so she'll need to update it to allow her to talk.
Okay, Gabriela, sorry we won't be able to hear your question tonight, but maybe it'll get asked among someone else. We have the Reddy family. Monica Reddy?
Have you ever done ballet?
No, I haven't. In my mind. I love to dance though. I love to dance, but never ballet. But you know what? I have a connection to ballet. That's really sweet. So about 4 years ago, I wrote a short story called By the Light of the Moon, and the Sonoma Conservatory of Dance, which is a ballet school in Sonoma near you, they turned my short story into a ballet. And so I got to see my words and my story have wings and basically, come to life in the on the stage. So I love ballet. It's just beautiful.
I danced in it.
You did? Oh my!
Leave it to Principal Reddy. I forgot your first name, sweetheart.
Addison.
That's
Addison.
right.
Oh, what did you play, Addison?
I was an angel.
Oh, yes, an angel. Oh, how
What
beautiful.
an amazing connection. So you danced in the author's play. That's extraordinary. All
Fantastic.
right, Addison. Well, thank you so much. Any other questions before we move on? All right. Okay. Well, next, I see we have Holly on, the Dawson family. Can we unmute Mr. Ruiz? Great. Thank you.
This is Talia.
Hi, Talia. Nice to hear you.
Did you forget your question? Ask your question about, you had a question about yellow hair.
Oh, you read.
Did you read the book, Talia?
Yes.
And what's your question about the book, Talia?
What changed yellow hair to be nice?
Oh, that's so good. I love that question. Well, yellow hair started off really mean. And yellow hair, for those of you who don't know, is one of the guards. But she has, Betita sees her, she's got yellow hair. It's kind of like a dyed color. And after Betita's mother gets very sick, she feels sorry for her. And so that's what makes her change her mind, and she gives Betita some crayons and some paper, because she just it changed. She had a change of heart because of how sick Betita's mom got. That makes sense?
Thank you, Talia. That's a really good question. And I saw that as a really pivotal moment in the story when Yellow Hair demonstrated some kindness, and Betita needed it because she was feeling alone in the detention center. So that was great. Okay, well, next we have Len, Len, if you can unmute.
Yeah, I didn't know my name was that. I was wondering, why did you choose the animal crane and not other animals?
Okay. So remember that myth that I was talking about? It's about a place. The myth says that the Aztecs came from a place called Aztlan. Aztlan has been translated, that's in an indigenous language called Nahuatl. And that Aztlan means land of the cranes. And so it made total sense to me to choose that bird or that animal because they came from Aztlan and then they came back to Aztlan. And just like the cranes leave their nesting ground or their homes, and then they go down and then they come back. And so that's why it made sense to me.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for your question, Len. Yeah, it was pretty incredible, Aida, how you made sure that the readers knew that Betita and her family felt comfortable in Aztlan in Mexico, but also just as comfortable in Los Angeles, California.
Yeah.
Like many of our students that kind of live in two worlds and feel like two places are strong connections to home.
Mm-hmm.
Next, we have Miriam Torres. If you can unmute, Miriam, and ask your question.
I'd like to make a comment. I'm a 7th grader, and I'm very interested in reading the book and excited to read it. Me and my friends have a book club, and we're gonna read the book.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you. That is really cool. How big is your book club?
4 people.
That's great. And do you guys discuss it after you've read it?
Yes.
Okay, will you promise to send me an email and tell me if it was like, okay, what you thought about it? And yeah, you can go to my website. You can contact me there through my website.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
That'd be great.
you.
You could be, your book club could be NVUSD 7th grade book critics. So that's great. That's awesome. Okay. Thank you, Miriam. Next we have David Bettis. If you can unmute, David.
David's using an older version of Zoom app, Dr. Machete.
Oh, David.
So sorry, David, we're not going to be able to hear your question. But maybe someone else will ask. Let's see, we have next Andrew Buckles.
So my question was, when did your book get published? Land of the Cranes. When did it get published?
It got published on September 15th. So not too long ago, just a couple of, I guess that's 3 weeks now, maybe, yeah.
Oh, thank you.
It's brand new.
Brand new. So we're really lucky we have the author here 3 weeks after her book got published. And just a reminder for students like Andrew and everyone else who's joined on, one of our main motivations, Aida, is that with distance learning and the pandemic and campus closures induced by COVID-19 since March, our students are spending so much time in front of the screen. And so, you know, right now the screen is the classroom, the computer is the classroom for our students, although we're moving towards a hybrid reopening towards the end of the month, and half of our families will be rejoining us for in-person instruction. But we wanted to counter screen time with this. And so it's really great that you get to serve as kind of part of our path of marching towards fighting some of the screen time. I know I have a 14-year-old son, and that's really important to me as a mom, and I think a lot of moms and dads that are out there. We have next Gretchen. Do you have a question for Ms. Salazar? You can unmute, Gretchen.
This is Gabriela.
Okay, hi, Gabriela.
Hi.
Hi.
Why did you make the book?
Well, that's a good question. I for the same reason that I write for everything that I write for children, I write it so that we can open a window into a world that you have never seen. And so, or maybe perhaps so that it could be a mirror where you could see yourself reflected inside the book, or as a roadmap so that you could maybe read what you read in the book and think, I can do it too. I can do this too. And so for you to be inspired. So I write all of the books that I write for children like you, so that you can get inspired, so you could see yourself, so you could maybe understand something that you didn't understand.
Thank you.
Great question. Good job, Gretchen. Thank you for that asking that important why. Great job. All right, next we have Megan Rose. If you want to unmute.
Hi, my name is Sydney, and I was wondering if you always wanted to be a writer, if you study being a writer in school.
Well, I started writing when I was in 5th grade. I didn't know that I wanted to be a writer. I just wrote it because I had a fancy pen and I love to read. But it wasn't until I was about 17 or 18 years old when I got to college, my first year of college, when I went, yes, this is what I want to do, because I saw somebody else do it, somebody like me, and who came from my same culture and languages, and that's why I wanted to. At that point, I said, I can do this too. But it took me a long time because it's hard, hard to become a published writer.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Megan. We appreciate your question. And if you're interested in becoming a writer, keep writing, keep reading and writing.
May I give Megan just a few pointers? If you're interested in anybody who's interested in becoming a writer, I would recommend first to read, and if you're a child, to practice, read as many books as you can. Check all of the books out that you're interested in. Even if you just start them and don't finish them, just read. and then practice. Get journals and practice writing, or if you practice on a computer or a tablet or whatever, practice. And the other thing is to listen. And don't forget to play. You have to play, and you have to listen to all of your friends, the way your friends speak, the way that your aunts and your uncles and your grandparents and your mom and dad or your caretaker, anybody who's around you, listen to them, because all that stuff is kind of going to fill your well. And then when it comes down times to write, you're going to be ready to go.
That's amazing. The stories will just pour out of them, right?
Yeah, they will. They will.
Amazing. Okay, next we have Balance Home. I hope I said that right.
Hi, my name is Jocelyn, and has the book came out in Spanish yet?
No, it has not. I'm actually auditioning to try to be the translator of it in Spanish. And what that means is that I have to translate a few pages, like the first 30 pages of the book. And then I have to send it to the publisher, and then they have to decide whether my translation is good enough. And then I'll have to translate the whole book. But in the meantime, they are planning on translating it. Usually my books get translated a year after publication. So the Spanish version probably won't come out until September of next year, 2021.
Oh, okay. Just asking. And I'm also very excited to read your other book, The Moon Within.
Oh, good. Yes, yes.
That's great. Thank you.
Oh, and I have to say also that The Land of the Cranes is an audiobook. Ms. Musetti, do you know if you have the audiobook version?
Ms. McMillan, you're here. Do we have the audiobook accessible?
Oh, yes, we do. We have
good.
a couple of copies. We also have, I think, almost 25 copies that are on the digital through Sora.
Oh, that's so great. If you get the chance to also listen to the book, that would be it's such a treat. You can actually, if you have the book and then listen to it, it's like somebody's reading to you, and the actors who did The Land of the Cranes, it's wonderful, so wonderful. Or you can like play Legos or garden or just, play with slime or whatever it is and listen to the audiobook. It's so good. So good.
It is. I loved the person you chose, Daniela, to narrate the story. So if you have the chance to also listen to it, I think that's a great suggestion. Marisol, you're next. Can you unmute?
My question was, where can you get the book?
Where can you get it?
Yeah, where can you get the book?
So we're, the flyer that went out, it's also on the NVUSD website. You do have the opportunity to pick it up at one of the local bookstores. That's right, Ms. McMillan, right?
Yes, it is.
And at two, I think we partnered with, right? They ordered it is it at Copperfield's?
And at Bookmine also.
And at Bookmine. So there's two local opportunities. You can also order the book online. Is that right, Aida?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can order it through booklandiabox.com.
Booklandia. And then we'll also be able to, we just got the copies, and so we'll have it accessible also through our NVUSD school libraries. Correct, Ms. McMillan?
Yes, as soon as the orders, they are always a little slower when it's a new publication, but yes, they are coming.
Great. Okay, thank you, Marisol. So make sure to pick up the book. Next, we have a question from Orlando. Or is that?
Hello.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Well, I'm just a big fan of Miss Salazar, and I'm really, really proud of the work that she's doing. I think the question that I had was, are there any plans or any discussions being made about the possibility of your books being moved into theater or film, into that other medium? I know you're so connected with so many different great artists. Has that conversation been Been had it all.
No, not yet. Not yet. It's a hard market. Actually, I did speak to an agent once in Hollywood. I went to this big office and it was a little bit discouraging because he said, you know, kids just want Captain Underpants. They just want to laugh. They don't want to cry. They just want to be entertained. But I think that that film agent really underestimates readers. I think readers love to have their heart, to fall in love and to have their heart broken and to feel inspired by different kinds of stories. So maybe one day I'll find an agent or somebody in Hollywood who's going to be, who knows that about people and young people who read.
Thank you so much for your question. Orlando, we're going to continue. We have a few more questions and we're down to 7 minutes before we transition into our evento en español for our Spanish speaking community. So let's go quickly. Eliana Palmer, you have a question?
Dr. Musetti, Eliana is running an older version of Zoom.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Eliana. We won't be able to hear your question tonight. Okay, we have M-A-I-T-E, is it Mighty or Mighty?
Mighty?
Mighty, sorry.
Same thing, Dr. Musetti. They're running an older version of the Zoom app.
Is it possible to get their questions in writing? I'd be happy to write them back.
Yeah, so Mighty and I can't remember the name of the last person, Miss Salazar. It's Aida Salazar. What's your website?
AidaSalazar.com.
Okay, so AidaSalazar.com. Maybe we can get that up on our website and make it super accessible. And Ms. Salazar's email is there, so you can write Ms. Salazar and she'll take your question. Next, we have Monica Covarrubias.
My name's Amelia, and I was really concerned of how do you pick the names for the people in the book?
Oh, you just asked such an important question, I have to tell you. So many of the characters in the book are named after children who died in detention or who died while crossing. And I chose their names because those children are no longer here. And I wanted to honor them. I wanted them to have a life outside of the brief life that they had. And I wanted, it's like writing writing somebody's name that you really love into the bark of a tree. It's kind of like that. They'll forever be there. And I feel like they will live on even a little bit inside the book. So yeah, and that was a very difficult decision. Thank you for your question.
Thank you. That's such a great question, Aida, and thanks for sharing. It's so powerful to hear that those children's lives can live on through the book and through all our readers that we know are going to join the reading community of Land of Cranes. Okay, we have a couple more, and then we're going to transition to our Noche en Español. We've got, is it Megan Rose? Yes, Megan Rose, if you can unmute.
This is Piper. I had a question. Where did you go to school?
Okay, so I went to Loma Vista Elementary School in Los Angeles in Southeast LA. And then I went to Bell High School. And then I went to UC Santa Barbara. But while I was at UC Santa Barbara, which is a university, I studied abroad, and I studied at UNAM, at the National University in Mexico City. And then I came back to Santa Barbara, I graduated, and then I finally went to Cal Arts, which is an art school outside of LA. And I got my master's degree at Cal Arts in writing.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. I hope you also are inspired to go and do your master's degree too?
Oh, Piper, she will. She's got a path. I know she
Okay.
will. Our NBUSD kids have paths, so it's really exciting. Next, we have Eric Rendell. Are we able to promote Mr. Ruiz? Eric Rendell has their hand raised.
Mr. Ruiz, you're...
Sorry, Dr. Musetti. I could promote them if you'd like, Dr. Musetti, to panelists, if you want to allow them to speak.
So is it also the older Zoom?
It's an older Zoom, yeah.
Okay. Let's keep where we kind of we're going to keep moving. Sorry about that, Eric. What about Gretchen?
Hi, this is for Borba.
Okay.
Go ahead, babe.
Why did she choose to make books?
Why did I choose to make books? Because it's what makes my heart happy. It really is. It's what has saved me from my own darkness. Like Betita, the character in the book, that's how she survives and how she gets inspired and how she kind of works out all the things that she's feeling. That's kind of what happens with me too, and that's why I write books. It helps me understand the world that I live in.
That's amazing. Okay, thank you so much for your question. We'll take one last question before we transition to our evento en español. We have Ruth.
Ruth is running an older version, Dr. Musetti.
Okay, I think we have one or two more hands I see up. How about Marisol?
I would just like to say that I'm 11 and I would like to take some tips on how, like, what would be the best way to write a book.
So the best way to write a book, if you're 11, is to be a good listener. To be a good listener and listen to all of the voices that are around you, all of the people who speak and how they speak, the words they say, and collect them. Collect stories and ask questions. Ask people, where were you born? How do you feel on a rainy day? Be curious about the world. And you're 11, so as an 11-year-old, don't forget to play, because the more that you play, the more that feeds your creativity, because writing has a lot to do with being creative and being free in your mind to create things. You know how when you play make-believe, well, this is the same thing when you write fiction, which is what I do. You make up stories, you play make-believe on the page. And so don't forget to never lose that about yourself. Always remember to be creative and to have fun when you're doing it. And more than anything is practice. Just write it. Just practice, practice, practice. And if you fail, that's okay. That's part of writing the book, because you learn. With every time that you fall or you fail, you learn, and it'll get better and better and better.
So, Ms. Salazar, we have to close and we're going to transition our Noche en Español. We want to thank you. Before we end tonight in English and hop on to the next Zoom, a lot of families that read, I think that registered for the event wanted to appreciate the fact that you were bringing the Latinx voice to children's literature. So I just want to let you know about the degree of appreciation that the NVUSD community expressed to be able to have a Latinx author creating that voice and that mirror. And also for our non-Latinx students to hear the story and to relate relate to that story and to be able to relate across difference. Last question, and it's kind of a heavy one, but is there anything our families can do who read the story, or students who get inspired to help families that are in the detention center? Your book is about activism. So any kind of last word of advice that you could maybe steer families and children that want to do something to address the issue of the challenges and the hardships of the detention centers?
There are two organizations that I would recommend that you look for. One is called Al Otro Lado, and they do a lot of work supporting migrants in the San Diego, Tijuana border. And then the other one is Raíces, Texas, and they do a lot of work supporting families that are along the Texas area. And then there's one more. There's one organization called Families Belong Together, and they're helping to keep families together.
That's great. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And we're so excited about more NVUSD students reading Land of Cranes. Thank you to everyone who joined us tonight. We're going to end this session and kick off our hour in Español con la autora Aida Salazar. So thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much.